Day 167. Lee walked in the direction of the church, focused on putting as much distance between himself and the town as he could. He was hoping to find Roger there, to let him know that he didn't need to run, that he was free from Buddy Tanner. He walked along stream beds and old logging roads. He even bushwhacked his own trail in places, doing his best to stay off established roads and the more well-traveled paths. Major Stillman woke early as he usually did. He found himself on his bed, fully clothed. He even had his boots on. It had not been a good night for him. He drank too much scotch and was suffering from the fallout of that. He washed his face and brushed his teeth and headed for the diner for some strong coffee. As he crossed the street, he saw Carl Fairley riding into town. He was furious and had things that he wanted to say to him. Now was not the time. He didn't have the strength or the clarity of mind to play this particular chess game right now. The two locked eyes for a moment until Major Stillman looked away and just kept walking without saying a word. Well, that suited Carl just fine, as he had absolutely nothing to say to the Major. When Carl arrived in his office, he immediately noticed that Hammer was gone. One of Carl's deputies came bursting in and frantically filled him in on the murders of Hammer and the other deputy that took place yesterday. He told him also about the unidentified body that was found in the drainage culvert. He had with him a soldier who was on duty yesterday on the platform that heard the shots that killed Hammer and the deputy. He told Carl all the details of what he had heard, and he answered all Carl's questions. Carl searched for clues in the alley behind the jail, but found none. He could not determine where the gunman entered the woods, or if he was alone. He traversed back and forth several times, but was unable to pick up his trail. Tyler Hobbs returned to his farmhouse and brought two of his closest group members up to speed on his meeting with Carl Fairley. He told him to keep it under wraps with the rest of the group for security reasons. Tyler had high hopes for their association with the constable. However, he still wasn't sure how it was all going to play out. It seemed to go well, but he had a difficult time reading Carl. He told his group that they were going to lay low for the time being until he could sort it all out. As Lee walked up the power line trail behind the church, he stopped and took out the monocular from his pack. He scanned the area and looked over the people working on the grounds of the church. There was a lot going on, but he didn't see Roger anywhere. He decided to try to move in for a closer look. He moved back into the woods and came around to the right of the pavilion and cautiously worked his way down toward the church. Steve, who was in the tower, spotted him first and radioed Greg, who alerted Richie, and the two of them went around and came up behind Lee. Greg called out for him to stop, and when he spun around, Richie had his rifle held up and pointed at him. Lee, seeing that they had the drop on him, dropped his rifle as ordered and sat down with his hands behind his head. When questioned, he told them that he had just happened upon the church as he hiked along the power line trail. He claimed he was just passing through after fleeing from his hometown some 30 miles south after it had been looted and burnt out. This was happening in several smaller communities up and down the river valley, and so his story seemed plausible at the time. He was invited to join the group for lunch and told he would be given his weapon back when he was ready to leave. It became clear to Lee as he ate with the group that Roger was not there with them. The entire group came together for lunch, and Lee figured that if Roger was there, that he too would have joined them for the meal. Lee was anxious to finish and get going. Sitting in one place after what happened yesterday made him uneasy. He wanted to find Roger, but at the same time he needed to put distance between himself and the murders that he had committed yesterday. Carl was dealing with the murder of his deputy and Hammer, as well as the unidentified body found in the culvert the day before. He had an instinct that the two incidences were connected as he started his investigation. When he returned to his office, Major Stillman, who was feeling a little better, was sitting in the chair opposite his desk. He immediately started on Carl about storming out of the board meeting the other day and about moving the horses. He claimed a right to them and told Carl that hiding them would not deter him from his objective of obtaining them for his men. Carl interrupted him and asked him to leave. He informed him that he was in the initial stages of the murder investigations and didn't have time for him or his issues at the moment. Being summarily discharged angered the major, and he demanded details of the murders. Carl just told him it wasn't a military matter, as he showed him out. Major Stillman promised Carl that their conversation was not over, as Carl slammed the door and returned to his desk. Carl couldn't get Tyler Hobbs out of his mind. The meeting the two had up at the hunting lodge stuck with him. He wanted to trust Carl and work with him to rid the region of the military's involvement, but something kept nagging at him. No matter how he considered it, he just could not bring himself to trust him. His instincts told him that there was more than meets the eye with Tyler Hobbs. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he just simply did not trust him. Captain Nunez watched the flurry of activity from his seat on the bench on the train platform. He saw Carl slam the door on Major Stillman as well. He knew Carl was a professional and wouldn't do anything to jeopardize the mission at hand. But at the same time, he knew the disdain Carl had for the major and was concerned that it could be a problem. In order to watch Major Stillman as closely as they needed to, they could not afford to rile him. They needed him to be calm and believe that he was completely in control. Right now, what the major felt was anything but complete control. Yes, this concerned Captain Nunez greatly. He made his rendezvous a short time later with Section 7 and obtained the exact location of Carl's hunting camp and decided to meet him there. He made his way into the mountains and camped up in the hills overlooking the lodge. He didn't want to make Abigail and the kids nervous, and so he decided to wait there for Carl to return before going down to the lodge. Section 7 also filled Nunez in on the fact that Carl had a surprise visit there yesterday from Tyler Hobbs. What is going on with Carl, the captain wondered. He was just as concerned for his friend as he was for the mission. As the group at church finished lunch, Lee was chomping at the bit to leave. He thanked them for feeding him and explained that he wanted to get out and get his camp set up before nightfall, and so he would be leaving directly. Pastor invited him to stay the night and assured him that they had plenty of space in the dormitory for him to be comfortable for a day or two, and that he need not be in a hurry to leave. As Lee thanked him again, but declined his offer, Dalton and Shima drove up to the pavilion. When Dalton saw Lee, he remembered him from town the other day when Carl Fairley put him in jail overnight for being drunk and disorderly in the trading post. "Are you feeling better today, friend?" he asked Lee. Lee nervously replied, "Do I know you, friend?" Dalton explained that he was in the post with Ish Patel when he got arrested. He had driven Ish into town to pick up supplies. Greg looked at Lee and asked, "Didn't you say you hiked up from your hometown downriver? You never said anything about being put in jail." Lee, very uneasy now, told Greg that he left that part out because he was embarrassed about being drunk. He told him that he was a recovering alcoholic and he fell off the wagon, and was put in the jail to sleep off his drunkenness overnight. He almost pulled it off. Greg looked like he was buying the story, when Dalton said, "You must have gotten released just in time. A deputy and the other prisoner that was in the other cell that night with you were murdered yesterday." This news was new to Greg, and he slowly turned to face Lee, who could tell by Greg's demeanor that he was suspicious. Lee looked at his rifle, leaning against the wall several feet away. As he did, Greg saw him, and both men went for the rifle at the same time. Lee reached it a split second before Greg did, but as he went to pick it up, he noticed a green laser dot on his chest. He stopped abruptly, and as he did, Greg grabbed the rifle. Richie was in the tower watching the whole thing, and he had his AR trained on Lee. Greg informed Lee that they were going to take him to see Carl Fairley. They had no way of knowing that Carl was already looking for him, since he was released just an hour or so before the murders. Lee couldn't help but think that if only he didn't try to come save Roger, if only he just selfishly walked away, that he himself would now still be free. He thought maybe he could talk his way out of things with the constable. He wasn't sure that he could. They tied his hands behind him with zip ties, and they loaded him into the power wagon. Off they drove toward town and Carl's office.